Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print. And we are talking about another Marvel comic book today. And we're talking about one issue, and it's 81 of the original Marvel Star Wars series. Now, when we think about the birth of the modern EU, a lot of people like to think that the modern EU is the post Return of the Jedi, with Heir to the Empire and Dark Empire. Those are kind of the big two stories that a lot of people will say, oh, that's the birth of the modern EU. To me, though, I guess what would be the true birth of the modern EU, being the post Return of the Jedi stuff, is actually this comic book here. This story is the very first post Return of the Jedi comic book ever. And it's kind of interesting too, because this is also Dark Empire gets a lot of credit for being the story that reintroduces Boba Fett and explains that he survived the Sarlacc. Well, this story actually shows him too. So this is the last issue in the Long Time Ago Volume 5 Fool's Bounty. So we are done with this trade after this episode. And then we have two more trades to go, and then we finish the Marvel series. So, here's the cover if you are curious. Actually, a pretty good cover. So, first story after Return of the Jedi. The story is right after the Battle of Endor. And kind of starts with Han Solo. I like that whole thing of, hey, it's me kind of thing. The story is called Jawas of Doom, actually. I did forget to mention that. So it's kind of strange, I guess, where this would be placed in the issue. It makes you immediately think that this is right after Return of the Jedi. Though later, of course, the Truce of Bakura would come out and explain that this is what happened the day after the Ewok celebration. Though this could be right after the Truce of Bakura, honestly. Because this panel here where Lando's talking to Wedge and Luke, and he's like, hey, Luke, Wedge, do these Ewoks know how to throw a party, or do they? And they do, Lando, and why not? We're worth it. That was Wedge. So it's kind of like, that's a little strange, right? That's there. So I mean, to me, this is right after the Truce of Bakura. So Han is back. Okay, this is the first time in the Marvel series, in the main Marvel series, not counting the Return of the Jedi limited run, that Han is back. Okay, so Han is now out of the carbonite, and he's back in the Marvel series. And this whole 9 months to a year that he was frozen is kind of messed with him. Basically, he kind of feels like, I guess kind of like a loser. He's like, I have no money. I don't really have any, thing to me now. It's like, yeah, I'm serving the rebellion, but I kind of got thrown right back into that. It's kind of, I want to kind of try and get my bearings. So he and Leia and R2-D2 go to Tatooine to get this stash that he's hidden there. Now, ironically, his account is actually frozen. Again, no pun intended, but that's what it is. His account is frozen. And so while they're trying to deal with that, R2-D2 gets captured by Jawas. And the Jawas actually have found this, actually right before they get R2-D2, they find this body out in the desert. And the body is very similar to that of Boba Fett. Turns out it is Boba Fett. The Sarlacc basically spat him out, and he is, unconscious. And so they pick him up, and it's kind of, I think he's dealing with memory loss too. So Han and Leia are going to go and get R2-D2. And while they're doing this, they have to try and get him from this sandcrawler, because the sandcrawler gets out of control. R2 is, they're trying to get him off of it. They finally get him, and the Jawas basically have abandoned this thing. So it's going, and it's actually heading back towards the Sarlacc pit. So Han goes up there, and he encounters Boba Fett. Now, Boba Fett does not know who he is. He actually says, keep the organic intruder covered. He wants to rob our masters. Or I'm sorry, that was the droid behind him saying that. Pardon me. But Boba Fett is like, okay, you know. So he does not know who he is. So Han's in there. He's trying to get R2D2. He's encountering Boba Fett. Boba Fett does not know who he is. Han knows who he is though, and so he gets R2D2 out, and so then Leia's chasing the Sandcrawler, and she's like, Han, 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 and so she's calling his name. And if you see that panel right here where Boba Fett is like, huh, and then he's like, Han, and then he's like, Solo, and so the Sandcrawler is going with Boba Fett in there. Boba Fett turns his blaster on Han. Han's like, oh no. He jumps off the Sandcrawler, and with Boba Fett in there, the Sandcrawler goes crashing back into the Sarlacc pit. So Boba Fett is now back in the Sarlacc pit, where he will then eventually be got out, or he'll get out again, and that's when he'll encounter Dengar, and the whole Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy will take place. So Han actually is attempting to save Boba Fett, which is kind of interesting. Han is kind of having that change of heart, and he's like, look, there's not this bounty on me anymore, and no one deserves to die. So he tries to save him. So I actually really like this story. Now, this is something that will come up on some people's lists of, the reasons why the expanded universe sucked. Boba Fett got thrown back into the Sarlacc pit. It is a little silly, I will be honest. The fact that he does, he's out, and then he goes crashing back in there with inside a Sandcrawler, only to escape a final time. But again, there really was no real plan, I guess, with the whole post-Return of the Jedi. Because remember, the Marvel Comics were not brought into C-canon status until much later. So at the time when Dark Empire came out, this stuff was considered secondary canon. And even before that, it was considered non-canon. It was brought into secondary canon status and then brought into the full canon status. So they needed a cool post-Return of the Jedi story. And so it's like, well, let's bring Boba Fett back. But again, we don't know his plan, so we're going to put him back in the Sarlacc pit, just to be on the safe side. So it is, like I said, it's a little silly. I'm not going to lie. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, because it's not like it'd be one thing if he blasts out and he's like, haha, and then he gets knocked in there again. To me, I think going down in a Sandcrawler, that's pretty cool. And I can buy then that he could survive another encounter with the Sarlacc pit, because he's inside that thing. And so the Sarlacc's working on the exterior of the whole Sandcrawler before it can get to Boba Fett. Now, we see in the Bounty Hunter Wars that Boba Fett is severely damaged after getting out. So eventually it did get to him. But the point is that, again, it's kind of a silly story. But, it's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't bother me that much. But Jawas of Doom, should you read this story? Is it an essential read? No, it's not. Kind of sad for being the first post-Return of the Jedi comic book, but honestly, I mean, you don't need to know that Boba Fett escaped only to go back in. Like the rest of the modern expanded universe, in terms of like in the 90s on, when Boba Fett comes back in Dark Empire, he says something like, oh, the Sarlacc found me indigestible or something. And then in the Bounty Hunter Wars, I don't think it mentions this. So you don't need to know that Boba Fett escaped and fell back in. You just need to know that he escaped. Is it silly? Yes. But is it the worst thing ever? Honestly, I don't think so. So that's about it for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time with another episode of the Star Wars Library.